On global news, we begin with climate. Global South requires $2 trillion a year to fight climate crisis. Hong Kong relaxes COVID rules for inbound tour groups. American aid workers is shot dead in Baghdad. Americans convicted in Japan on Goslin's escape return home, and Biden and Trump deliver final midterm election pitches. On climate, according to a United Nations-backed report, developing and emerging countries, including China, need investments well beyond $2 trillion annually by 2030 if the world is to stop the global warming juggernaut and cope with its effect. $1 trillion should come from rich countries, investors, and multilateral development banks, is the analysis commissioned by Britain and Egypt, hosts respectively of the 2021 United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow and this week's COP27 event in Sharm el-Sheikh. The report released on Tuesday said the balance of about $1.4 trillion must originate domestically from private and public sources. Present investments in emerging and developing economies other than China stand about $500 billion. The new 100-page analysis, Finance for Climate Action, is presented as an investment blueprint for greening the global economy quickly enough to meet Paris Eliminate Treaty goals of topping the rise in global temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius and at 1.5 degrees Celsius if possible. Warming beyond that threshold, scientists warn, could push Earth towards an unlivable hothouse state. The report is amongst the first to map out the investment required across the three broad areas covered in United Nations climate talks: reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions that drive warming, mitigation, adapting to future climate effects, adaptation, and compensating poor and vulnerable nations for unavoidable damages already incurred, known as loss and damage. One of the report's leads, Vera Songwe, said unlocking substantial climate finance was key to solving development challenges today. Hong Kong's government said on November 7th it was relaxing COVID-19 curbs on inbound tour groups, including permitting them to enter theme parks and museums after arriving in the financial hub. Hong Kong has relaxed numerous of its strict coronavirus policies in recent months, including hotel quarantine for international arrivals as of September 26th. However, international arrivals are still subject to a series of coronavirus tests and banned from entering bars, restaurants, and venues like sports clubs for the first 3 days. The government said precise arrangements for visiting tourists will be launched this month in a profile financial summit for which over 200 financial executives who flew into the former British colony were excused from the Hong Kong's rules for international arrival. Many local residents have pointed out has been battered by the coronavirus curbs, which have lasted. Said attackers have shot dead an American aid worker in Baghdad in a rare killing of a foreigner in the Iraqi capital in recent years. The man was shot in his car on Monday as he entered the street where he lives in Karada, a lively commercial district in the center of the Iraqi capital. Two security officials confirmed a United States citizen who worked for an international aid organization had been killed without giving his name. Police sources also said the man's wife and child were in the car with him but were not hurt. The assault happened after the man was cut off while driving in the streets by a car, while assailants in another car shot him dead. According to reports, the country's armed forces commander-in-chief gave an order to form an investigative committee into the killing of the U.S. citizen. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said, according to reports, that the department is aware of the reports of the killing of a U.S. aid worker in Baghdad and is looking into them. But he said the department was not yet in a position to confirm the accounts of the death or the person was a U.S. citizen. According to more reports, the man had been renting an apartment in Karada's Wada area since May last year. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the killing. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad was unable to give an immediate comment. Such attacks against individuals in the Iraqi capital have been sporadic since the defeat of the ISIS group in the country in 2017, but rockets are sometimes fired towards the U.S. Embassy. A U.S. civilian contractor died of a heart attack while hiding from a rocket raid on Iraqi base hosting soldiers from the U.S.-led coalition fighting ISIL in March 2021. And in March 2020, 2 months after the assassination of the Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. drone attack in Baghdad, 2 American soldiers and 1 British soldier were killed in the same attack, the deadliest in years. Monday's attack came after Iraq's new government cabinet, headed by Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, was given a vote of confidence by parliament in late October. Al-Sudani was named by the Iran-backed coordination framework composed largely of Shia parties. Still, an American father and son sentenced in Japan on charges of assisting ex-Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn, who had been awaiting trial on various financial misconduct charges, including underreporting his compensation escape to Lebanon, hiding in a box, have been returned to the United States, their lawyer said. Michael Taylor, a former Green Beret, was sentenced in July last year in Tokyo District Court to 2 years in prison, while his son Peter Taylor was sentenced to 1 year and 8 months. The Taylors were arrested in Massachusetts in May 2020 and extradited to Japan in March 2021, though they fought against deportation to Japan. The U.S. and Japan have an extradition treaty, while Lebanon has no extradition treaty with Japan. Ghosn is French, Brazilian of Lebanese ancestry. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Prisons online site lists Michael Taylor as being at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles and set for release on January 1st, 2023. The lawyer for the Taylors, Paul V. Kelly, said by email on Tuesday that he was in talks with parole officials about an earlier release. Peter Taylor has already been released and is back with his family in Massachusetts, said Kelly, whose office is based in Boston. On U.S. midterm elections 2022, coast-to-coast candidates and big-name backers have made their last appeals to voters in the final hours of campaigning for the midterm elections in the United States, with Republicans excited about the prospect of winning back Congress and President Joe Biden insisting his party could spring a surprise. Democrats argue victories for the Republicans could intensely and adversely reshape the country, abolishing abortion rights nationwide and unleashing broad threats to the very future of democracy in the United States. Republicans say the public is tired of Biden's strategies amidst increasing prices and concerns about crime. Arriving back at the White House a short time later, Biden was more frank, saying, and I quote, "I think we'll win the Senate. I think the House is tougher." Asked what the reality of governing would be like, he responded, more difficult. Non-partisan election forecasters predict that Republicans are likely to pick up about 25 seats in the 435-seat House of Representatives, more than about 25 seats in the 435-seat House of Representatives, more than enough to win a majority. Analysts said the party could also pick up the 1 seat they need to win control of the Senate, the upper house. According to reports from Washington, D.C., says such an outcome could be cataclysmic for the Democrats and Biden in particular over his next 2 years in office. Dozens of Republican candidates, some of whom could be elected as governors or election administrators in key states, have also echoed and amplified Trump's baseless claims of fraud in his 2020 election defeat. The reality show star turned politician has constantly hinted that he may run for president again in 2024. At a rally for Republican candidates in Ohio, Trump said he will make an announcement a week after the election at his Florida estate. More stories in business and economy. G20 host Indonesia says Putin may seek to join summit virtually. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not anticipated to attend the upcoming G20 Leaders Summit in Bali, his Indonesian counterpart Joko Widodo has said, according to reports. The host of the summit, Widodo, said in an interview with the Financial Times that he has a strong impression the Russian leader will not attend the event. According to more reports on Monday, Widodo said Russia was welcome at the summit and expressed concern that the meeting could be overshadowed by a very worrying rise in international tensions. Widodo's comments come after Putin last month said he would think about attending the summit, but Russia would definitely be representing at a high level. The G20 summit will be the first gathering of the leaders of the world's biggest economies since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and is likely to be dominated by the fallout of the war. Indonesia has rejected calls by Western countries and Ukraine to exclude Russia from the summit, promising to maintain neutrality and emphasizing the potential for cooperation on food and energy security. At the United Nations General Assembly last month, 16 members of the G20 voted in favor of a resolution condemning Moscow's attempted annexation of 4 regions of eastern Ukraine. Other G20 members, China, India, and South Africa, abstained, while the European Union is not represented at the United Nations body. Widodo has also invited Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has said he will not attend if Putin is there. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are among the world leaders anticipated to travel to the summit. More on economy, world air travel jolts to 74% of pre-pandemic levels. Global air travel continued its recovery from the pandemic in September as passenger traffic rose 57% compared with 2021, trade association figures have shown. Passenger traffic reached 74% of pre-pandemic levels this September as people rushed back to travel following the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions. Data from the International Air Transport Association, IATA, has also shown on Monday. The Asia Pacific, which was slower than other regions to lift border curbs, recorded by far the major jump in travel, with passengers traffic growing 464% compared with last year. Japan, Hong Kong, and Taiwan recently removed border restrictions in an attempt to revive their pandemic-battered travel restrictions. China, the region's largest economy by far, continues to restrict non-essential travel by its citizens and subject all arrivals to 10 days of quarantine under its ultra-strict dynamic zero-COVID policy. Middle Eastern Airlines recorded the next biggest rise in passenger traffic, up to 150%, followed by North America and Latin American Airlines, which saw traffic rise 129% and 99% respectively. African Airlines traffic climbed 91%, while European carriers saw traffic rise 78%. Broken down by domestic and international travel, overseas traffic climbed 122%, while internal traffic rose 7%. In contrast, global air cargo demand, while just slightly below pre-pandemic levels, fell 11% compared with September 2021 as slowing economic growth and recession fears weighed on demand. International Air Transport Association, IATA, Director General Willie Walsh welcomed the figures as a positive sign for global aviation in the face of economic and geopolitical uncertainties. In Africa, Guineans in Cape Verde are keeping their traditions alive. A Guinean association based in the neighborhood of Alto da Gloria on the outskirts of the capital of Cabo Verde, Praia, is working hard to keep their culture and traditions of their home country alive. Older members of the cultural organization Cabas de Terra are teaching their children about the song, dance, and poetry of Guinea-Bissau. Believing in its significance that the young people born in Cape Verde understand the culture of the country their families come from. Guineans are the biggest community of foreigners living in Cape Verde, and like most of his fellow countrymen, Daisy's children have never been to Guinea-Bissau. The association, formed in 2013 in the informal neighborhood, gives Guineans the opportunity to return to their roots every week, even if for a few hours, and in the process pass on their culture and traditions to the younger generation. Now, several stranded at Nairobi Airport as pilot strike enters 4th day. On Monday, as the Kenyan Airways pilot strike continues, the airline was forced to cancel 75% of its flights, leaving thousands of passengers stranded. Members of the Kenyan Pilots Association commenced their industrial action on Saturday, despite a court suspension order after it failed to reach an agreement in talks with management on improved working conditions. Their demands include the company lifting the suspension of payments to the Staff Provident Fund and for salaries owed from the COVID-19 pandemic period to be paid. The cancellation of flights by Africa's second major airline is having a huge effect on travel across the continent. While some people have managed to find alternative flights, others have not been so lucky. The government of Kenya is doing nothing about it to make sure that people go back to their homes. There are people who have to work to do and now are stuck here. Like 4 days is a long time, says South African Martha Magumbo. Others like Ifebushola Shotunde are disappointed as the alternative flights that have been offered have substantially added their travel time. The strike is worsening the despairs of the troubled national carrier, which has been running at a loss for years, despite the government pumping in millions of dollars to keep it afloat. It is also likely to have a negative effect on Kenya's exports, as the airline transports some 150 tons of fresh produce on average to Europe and the Middle East. And finally, on global news and sports, Qatar national team's road to World Cup 2022. Qatar is planning to make history on November 20th when it becomes the first country to make its debut at the FIFA World Cup by virtue of being the host. FIFA announced Qatar as the host of the 2022 World Cup in December 2010, news that brought the attention of football fans to the Gulf nation. However, football was formally recognized as a sport in the country long before that. Qatar Football Association QFA was formed in 1960 and it became a FIFA member 3 years later. After spending the first 2 decades on the losing end of most international matches, Qatar's team made its first impact at the Gulf Cup in 1984 when it reached the final, which is it lost to Iraq on penalties. The 1990s saw the rise of the Anabi. The 1992 Qatar won its first ever Gulf Cup and qualified for the Summer Olympics. Despite never having qualified for the World Cup before, Qatar came close to making the final cut on a number of occasions. They were in the race for a spot at the 1990 World Cup but finished third in the final round of qualifiers and dropped out of the reckoning for France in 1998 after losing their last playoff to Saudi Arabia. Qatar's advancement at the regional and continental level continued in the 2000s as they won the gold medal at the Asian Games as host. The Anabi's biggest honor, however, came in 2019 when they won the Asian Cup for the first time. Qatar started off the tournament in the UAE with an impressive run in group stage, winning all 3 games and scoring 10 goals. The battle past Iraq in the round of 16, edged out South Korea in the quarterfinals, and thrashed UAE in the semi-finals. In the finals, star forward Almoze Ali put Qatar ahead early on, and a strong defensive unit led by goalkeeper Saad Al-Shib helped the side seal a 3-1 win. The goal they conceded in the final was the only one throughout the tournament, while scoring 19. The team returned home to a hero's welcome and raised the fans' expectations for the World Cup. The results since the 2019 win have been mixed. Qatar were invited for the 2019 Copa America to provide quality international exposure. They lost 3 matches and drew 1. After this timeout, I'll be back with Zumo Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back, Zumo Nigeria. 2023, CJN wants election tribunal judges against corruption. Justice Olukayode Aruola, Chief Justice of Nigeria, CJN, has won 307 members of 2023 election petition tribunals to avoid corruption and follow the path of justice in adjudicating election petitions that will be brought before them next year. On Monday, Justice Aruola issued the warning while administering oaths on 307 judges, judicial officers, including few magistrates and registrars, that will constitute members of the election tribunals, that he will not condone any act of recklessness, abuse of power, and public trust. According to him, it is a rare privilege for those judges to be nominated to serve, and therefore your lordships must give a good account of yourselves. He reminded the judges that they are anticipated to conduct their affairs within the ambit of the law and the oath that has just been administered on them. He said anything short of that will place them on a collision course with history, and then God will ask you the questions that you might not be confident enough to answer. According to him, there is virtually nothing that has not been seen or heard before, but they should be prepared to see and hear more, especially as you begin to educate on election matters in 2023. The CJN confidently assured the members that the society in which they operate will surely expect the impossible from each of them as members of Election Petition Tribunal's Daily Time NGR gathered. The President of the Court of Appeal, Justice Monica Dongban Mensen, also speaking at the event, warned the members of the Election Tribunal to avoid political pressure, influence, and gratification. Section 130, subsection 3A and B of the Electoral Act, she said, state that the Election Petition Tribunal shall be constituted no later than 30 days before the election and open its registry for business 7 days before the election. She thanked the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, UK8, UNDP, European Union, EU Policy and Advocacy Center, PLAC, DIA and EFES for their untiring support to the judiciary. Still on politics, G5 governors launch campaign against Atiku in what appeared to be an official flag-off of the campaign against their party's candidate, Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike, and other G5 governors yesterday inaugurated a political offensive against the presidential flag-bearer of the People's Democratic Party, PDP. Wike, his Abia, Oyo, Enugu, and Benue counterparts, Okezie Ekpezu, Seyi Makinde, Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi, and Samuel Ortom, declaring that the attempts to break their ranks were failing because they abandoned to save Nigeria. They spoke on Sunday night during a dinner organized in honor of the G5 by Governor Ortom at the new banquet hall of Government House, Makurdi. High points of the dinner, which many consider as a kickoff of the campaign against their own party and candidates, was the bestowing of honorary citizen status on his colleagues by the host, Ortom. Speaking at the event, Wike said nobody can break the ranks of the 5 PDP governors, aka G5, who have continued to persist on the resignation of the party's national chairman, Senator Iyachu Ayu. He noted that because the 5 governors had remained dogged on their demand, people have made numerous efforts to break their ranks but cannot succeed. Noting that inclusivity remains a precursor for peace and unity, he said, agreement is agreement, respect agreement so that there will be peace, there will be unity. What we are asking for is inclusivity, include everybody. The governor said that the G5 comprises people who have shown leadership in their various states and on issues of national concern, taking the risk to speak the truth, maintain integrity, and are consistent. Lastly, Abuja-Kaduna rail service to resume this month, says Minister. The federal government has said that train services on the Abuja-Kaduna rail line will resume in November. The Minister of Transportation, Muazu Sambo, made this known on Monday while giving the scorecard of his ministry in Abuja. He said sufficient security had been put in place to guarantee the safety of passengers. The minister, however, did not specify the dates of the rail's commencement of service. The federal government had said that the Abuja-Kaduna rail lines will remain short until those held captives by bandits were released. The managing director of Nigeria Railway Corporation, Fidet Okiria, disclosed this according to reports. He noted that the corporation had restored the destroyed rolling stock and fixed the track, but the train service would not resume without a safe release of the remaining passengers held hostage. He said government has set up a committee to ensure maximum security for both train passengers and facilities during operation. We believe proper security measures should be put in place, and until then, the federal government wouldn't approve the functioning of the train station. A recap of major stories says Global South requires $2 trillion a year to fight climate crisis. Hong Kong relaxes COVID rules for inbound tour groups. American aid worker is shot dead in Baghdad. Americans convicted in Japan on Goslin's escape return home. And Biden and Trump deliver final midterm election pitches. And that's all we have on the news at this hour. Always learn as if you will live forever and live like you will die tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Reich. You have a blessed day.